Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, here's the chat window. There we go. Welcome back. It's been a week. um, yeah, I'm trying to do these again, get back into doing these again, see if people are still interested in tuning in. I do need to do them more regularly, but I thought I would come on and chat with y'all this morning, see how everybody is doing. Normally, we get a few people kind of right off the bat. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. Normally, we get a few people right off the bat. I'm going to talk. Good morning. Nice to see you. I'm slowly working my way into doing these again, hopefully on a more regular basis. Yeah, so sometimes life shakes things up a little bit, and it's okay. We'll get back. We get back into it. I'm glad it's a nice surprise. Happy to see you this morning. Um, so usually it takes about 7 minutes or so before I don't know why seven. That's stuck in my head. 7 minutes before people really start joining from like Facebook and different places. And I was having some challenges streaming to, I think it was to TikTok this morning. Last time I was live here, and also on TikTok. Um, it's really hard. These social media outlets, they restrict streaming, or like you have to reapply every so often, or if you have to reconnect and all these things. So I didn't have time to take care of that this morning. So I'm on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, I think, this morning, which I think most people come in from anyway. So what are we talking about this morning? The title of this is Ego, Persona, and Love. So I'm going to talk about ego a little bit. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, it has been a little bit, hasn't it? Thank you. That is so nice of you to say. Um, Thank you. It's good to be back. It's good to be seen. It's good to be back. So we're going to talk this morning about ego, persona, and love. I'm going to get into it. Why am I going to talk about ego? Don't we want to get rid of our ego? Don't we want to experience ego death? No, not necessarily. Um, but I'll get into that. I'll get into all of that. So we'll talk about ego. Now, ego is one of these things that a lot of spiritual teachers will be like, you've got to kill your ego. I've heard spiritual teachers say that the ego is the devil, all of these things. And that's sort of a very limited view of what ego is. And I will get into what ego is, but I'm also going to talk about why that's a very limited view. Ego is something we have, it's a tool, like our body, right? We have a body, the body is a tool. Sometimes my body cooperates with what I want to do, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm 53 years old, I get lots of aches and pains, I'm getting white hair in my beard, right? Sometimes my body's not doing what I want it to do. Does that mean I get rid of it? No, because it's still useful. And so ego and persona, and I'll talk about what the differences between those can be useful tools, but they can also not. There's the old idiom that if the only tool you have is a hammer, all of your problems look like nails, right? It's like, I have one solution for everything. I'm going to pound on this with a hammer. So ego is not always doing the right thing, or often not doing the right thing. So it is useful for certain things, and it is not useful for certain things. So let's get into it, and we'll talk about what I mean by ego. I always like to start by talking about the terms that I'm using, just so that people can understand what I'm talking about. Not that my definition of things is better than anybody else's. So if you want to go to Freud's definition of ego, or you have your own, or some other person's, it's totally fine. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about ego. just so we have a better understanding of each other. Ego is your collection of beliefs and stories about who you are. That's it, right? So when I say I am a 53-year-old man, I live in Maine, and I teach shamanism, amongst other things, that is ego. Those are all beliefs. And you might say, well, that's true. Like I've seen your birth certificate. It's true. I know where you live. It's true. Whether or not it's true, the idea that I hold something to be true in my mind makes it a belief. Belief is anything you hold to be true. The sun rises in the east, and some people would argue, well, the sun doesn't rise, the earth rotates. Okay, but generally, that's a belief. The sun rises in the east. Whether it's true, whether we agree that it's true or not, right? We, it can be useful. It can help us to become more flexible in our belief system if we begin to believe, if we begin to have more flexibility in our beliefs, and we stop thinking that our beliefs are truth with a capital T. Our beliefs are things we hold to be true. And we can examine our beliefs and find that sometimes some things that might have been true for us in the past are no longer true for us, right? I used to love tuna noodle casserole when I was a kid until my mom made it like 3 times a week. That's an exaggeration. And then I don't love it anymore. That is something that I've changed positions on. Now, if I held the belief, I love tuna noodle casserole, I would continue to eat something that I have lost interest in, right? It's a very simple belief, but when I look at it, I can say, I can adjust my belief and say, I used to like it. I don't like it so much anymore. My tastes have changed. And that seems more true for me today than just saying I like something that I don't. Okay. So, what are some things that we hold to be true? And it doesn't have to be like, I believe in God. It doesn't have to be that big. It can be small things like, I'm a 53-year-old man. I hold that to be true. I had my birthday. I know what year, what day. I know the hour I was born, the hour and the minute I was born. It's on my birth certificate. Right. It's can be useful to have that belief. And it can be, when I go to the doctor and they ask me how old I am, or I apply for AARP, or, one of those things that you're able to do when you're over 50, that can be a useful thing for me to have. But I also look at some people who are my age who are starting to really, decline physically, decline mentally, that sort of thing. Hopefully not too many people, but and be like, oh, well, it's just natural for me at this age to kind of let myself go and not take care of myself. That would not be so useful for me. Right. So we can start to look at these things. What does it mean to be this? What's it mean to be that? Right. So then I'll get into persona. So again, ego is just a collection of beliefs that you have about who you are. And ego starts forming shortly after we're born. When you're first born, you don't really have an ego. You don't really know that you are a separate being. That's something that is taught. We are conditioned to believe, to have all these beliefs about who we are. What does that tell you about them? It tells me that some of the beliefs I have about myself are not my own. If I'm conditioned to be this way, if I'm conditioned to think that, in English I say I am John. Sometimes I prefer the expression I am called John. So when you're born, you don't really have an idea that you are separate from the world. You have a few stimuli that you respond to. And over time, you learn that there are these big objects that give you the things that you need. They're very important. In fact, in every language in the world, this is one linguistic universal, bigness is associated with importance, right? The big boss. right? The big event, that sort of thing. In every language that they've studied, bigness is associated with importance, and the theory is that we learn this as infants. We learn that these big objects that we can perceive give us things like food and warmth and comfort and that sort of thing, provide our basic survival needs, and so they must be incredibly important. And then we learn that we can please the important things when we respond to certain stimuli. So we learn that we have a name. We learn that we have a family. We learn that our family has certain norms. And so our family, our education, our culture, the country that we live in, the city that we live in, the town, they all express norms. The town that I live in, not where I live, but in the there's a center of town. It's very small, but it's where all of the official buildings are. All of the official buildings are painted the same color. And there are many homes in the area that are painted the same color because people wanted to match or whatever. That is a norm to have buildings in this area. Most buildings, not all buildings, but most buildings in this area are the same color. It's a very pretty yellowish color, right? So that's a norm in my area. It's also a norm to that um, people are people help their neighbors. We're very, when you talk about people in an area, right? I've had neighbors like just come to my door to help me out with something they noticed, like somebody ran my mailbox down, and a neighbor found my mail and brought it to me one time. And um, was having trouble assembling a shed one time, and a neighbor came by and was like, "Oh, let me help you." So this is a norm. I've not experienced that everywhere I've lived. People tend to be social with their neighbors, but not always, and not always in pleasant ways and that sort of thing. So that's a norm that is enforced in an unspoken way. People don't usually write norms down. We do have some norms that are written down. We call those laws or rules, right? But we think about all of the stuff that we hold to be true. Boys wear blue, girls wear pink, right? Boys play with trucks, girls play with dolls. I'm just talking about some gender stuff here, right? Those are unwritten norms that if you violate, there can be some consequences sometimes, depending. Hopefully less consequences today than there used to be. If I had worn a pink shirt to school when I was a kid, good morning. Good morning to you. You just completed your first journeying workshop. That's awesome. Happy to hear that. Journeying is amazing. Once you learn how to journey, it's there's no end to what you can do with it. It's a life-changing skill. So good for you. That's awesome. I still remember learning the journey for the first time. It was like, wow, amazing. um, yeah, it's a life-changing skill. It's something you can use for the rest of your life and do all kinds of things with. It's really great. Um, so our culture, our education, you know, teaches us things. Sometimes it teaches us explicitly. You're going to learn your ABCs, right? The alphabet goes in this order. Why does the alphabet go in that order? Somebody decided that at some point, that the alphabet goes in a certain order. We have a little song, ABC, right? Yeah, I understand that for sure. Yeah. Yeah, birth of a child is pretty life-changing as well. Yeah. I had I still I yeah, birth of my children was quite a day. We'll put it that way. Um so our culture enforces norms. Our education enforces norms. Sometimes learning is explicit, sometimes it's implicit, right? You observe the people around you, and I see particularly social media now, things go viral really quickly. And my daughters were younger, they would go for trends. Oh, all of a sudden they needed a shell necklace. They both needed shell necklaces. All right, we'll go. I'll take you someplace I know, a tourist shop that sells shell necklaces. Why? Because it became this trend. Everybody needed to wear shell necklaces. And there's a whole aspect of sort of signaling that happens in culture, right? You wear certain clothes, people know that represents certain things within a culture. Like one of those things might be just that you belong, right? So it's very common where I live to see people in the grocery store wearing camouflage. Um, I live in an area where a lot of people hunt, and a lot of people just wear camouflage all the time, and I don't think about it much other than I kind of laugh. I'm like, oh, I can't see you over there by the Pop Tarts in your camouflage. I'm not making fun of people for wearing camouflage. It's just the idea of camouflage and the purpose. So again, there's a purpose of camouflage, right? Camouflage is invented to blend into the surroundings for hunting, for the military, that sort of thing. Um, but people now wear it for other purposes, for cultural purposes. Same thing with baseball caps. People, baseball caps were invented, or that type of cap was invented to keep the sun out of the eyes, right? It comes from, I believe, from Civil War caps that had the brim that were meant to keep the sun out of the eyes, and then were worn by baseball players. And now, like, people wear baseball caps that don't even have baseball stuff on them, right? You might wear a baseball cap that has "I love fishing" or "I love grandma" or whatever on it. Again, it's fashion, it's signaling, that sort of thing. And this is just one of the very small ways that culture impresses upon us our role and the rules that we need to fulfill. So a lot of our ego is shaped primarily unconsciously. We don't really think about it that much, right? You don't think about the ego that much. We don't think about, what is it that I believe about myself? What is it that I hold true about myself? We just go, yeah, I'm a guy, I'm 53 years old, I live in the state of Maine in the US, and I've got two daughters, I'm a dad, I'm a dog dad and a cat dad, and I paint and I teach shamanism and yada, 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 right? All of those things are just beliefs, whether or not they are verifiably true, whether or not anybody else agrees to them. These are beliefs that I have, and that is ego. Ego is the structure of those beliefs that I have. What's the issue with ego then? It's, is it useful for me to have these beliefs? And what is the purpose? What's the purpose of ego? And what you know what's good about it? And I'll talk about that before I say where ego leads us astray. The purpose of ego is to keep this body and mind alive while we are inhabiting it. So I believe that you are not the body, and you are not your thoughts, and you are not your perceptions. You are the one who is perceiving. You're deeper than that. If you can find it, you can find the you that you are by going deeper and deeper in here. And it's easier to do that if you allow the ego to fall away, at least temporarily. If you give up, this is who I am, this body, this mind is who I am. However, my divine self, as you are all divine selves, my divine self is using this body and mind to have experiences in the world. That's why it incarnates, that's why it comes into a body. And so you cannot have those experiences if you don't have a body, you don't have a mind. So we have a structure that makes us take care of the body and the mind. It makes us feel like the body is important. It makes us feel like this body is who I am, right? This is who I am. If that's true, I'm in trouble. This body's getting older. This body gets sick. I've got white hair in my beard. Someday this body will die, right? But we get so the ego makes us very attached to the body. It makes us think the body is who we are, but we are so much more than that. And it's challenging to understand that until you do some spiritual work and start to touch the divine being that is within you, the divine spark that is in unborn, undying. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning to you. Nice to see you. Right? So it's challenging to see beneath the ego, but we can do work to do this, right? Meditation, journey work, um, shadow work, direct work on the ego. Certain substances can call it ego death. It's not ego death. The ego returns afterwards. People will go through these ego death experiences and they'll go, everything I was everything. I was one with the universe. I was having a non-dual experience. I was just experiencing flow and all these visuals and all of this stuff, and there was no longer me there. And then what happened? Well, then I snapped back, right? So ego death, people talk about ego death. A lot of spiritual teachers talk about ego death. I don't think it's a thing. I don't think it's a permanent thing. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know anybody who's experienced it permanently. Maybe when you experience it permanently, and I'm not saying I know everything about everything. I don't. There are stories in Tibetan Buddhism about monks doing sitting in meditation and like dissolving into the rainbow body, right? So their physical body actually dissolves and they turn into this rainbow of light and just disintegrate from meditation. So at that point, has ego death happened? Maybe, maybe. Um, but that's kind of a final thing. While you're walking around in a body, while you're steering a body, you're think of the body as a vehicle. Your ego is probably not going to die, but can become less attached to the ego. Ego degradation. I like disentanglement or detachment, right? So the ego, you can still be here, but yeah, so it implies that the ego, like something about the ego changes, which may happen or may not happen. But the you who you are, your beingness, um, like starts to take a step back as if it doesn't really go anywhere. Time and space don't really matter to your beingness, but um, it's easier to describe in temporal terms. Takes a step back, temporospatial terms. Takes a step back from the ego and says, "Ego, go do what you're going to do." I disidentify is probably a better word. Disidentify from the ego. Do you think there's a specific state of consciousness where you're in ego death? I think there's a specific state of consciousness in which the ego temporarily goes to sleep. Is there a specific state of consciousness that is permanent in which the ego has gone away completely? I've not experienced that, and I've never met anybody who's experienced that. So I don't know, is my best answer for that. But you can definitely achieve certain meditative states where the ego is no longer in play. So let's talk about that a little bit. Um, I'll talk about it from a physical perspective for a second, because there is a physical analog. Now, I don't think that consciousness is a purely physical process, because science has had a really, really tough time locating consciousness and ascribing the electrical activity of the brain to our first person subjective experience of the world, right? So, but for a moment, let's say that the brain is a contributor to the experience that arises in our consciousness, right? We perceive things through our sense organs, and experiences arise in our consciousness. And the brain is sort of a transceiver of that. So there's a collection of parts of your brain. It is not a single part, but a collection of parts of your brain that neuroscientists refer to as the default mode network, or the DMN. The default mode network is essentially responsible for the experience of ourself as a separate being. It is the physical manifestation of ego, right? It is constantly in action, working to determine who we are, right? To give us an experience of who we are. There are, through strapping people into EEGs, there are experiences, there are meditative states and other, we'll say meditative states, spiritual states of consciousness in which the default mode network gets really quiet. When that happens, the sense of ego dissolves a little bit, goes away. Sense of separation from everything goes away a little bit. People have what we might refer to as non-dual experiences, right? Um, so this has been observed in lots of research. Sure. The thinker, I like that. When you're a digital cowboy, what's a digital cowboy? Yeah, you can absolutely introduce yourself. I'd like to know more about what a digital cowboy is. Um, what does that term mean to you, digital cowboy? Ah, okay. That's you too. Okay. Which is a great introduction to the idea of persona, right? Persona. What is persona and what does it have to do with ego? So, persona is an outward expression of who we are. You can think of it as a mask that we wear to show the world. The word persona. Sorry, my alarm is going off if you hear that. Forgot that I had that set. Sorry, just responding to a message. Persona, the word persona comes from the masks that they used to wear in Roman and Greek theater, right? So, Roman and Greek theater, to play a character, you would put a mask on and then you would present a different face to the world. All of us do this, and you might think, well, I'm really genuine. I am just me all the time. Um, and that's great. That's a great thought. But when we are being social, we, most of us, tend to change who we are slightly and how we behave, at least slightly, depending on the circumstances and the people that we interact with, right? So, for example, when my children are around, I am being dad. I'm putting on my dad persona, even though they're adults now. I put on my dad persona and we um, joke around and we go play mini golf and we, talk in certain ways and we watch TV shows together and that sort of thing. I do not behave that way with my students, right? I don't talk to my students the same way I talk to my children, right? In a romantic relationship, I behave a certain way, and again, like I'm not being disingenuine. I'm a adjusting my behavior, right? So we put on these personas, they're outward expressions that we wear. And it's fine. It's not that you're consciously deceiving people. We behave in different ways. We put on different personalities, and the word personality comes from persona. We put on different personalities depending upon the role that we're playing, depending on the situation that we're in, right? If you work in an office, you might have, wear different clothes when you go into the office and speak in a different way to people than you might at home or when you're hanging out with your friends, right? There's certain things you can say to your friends that you might not be able to say in an office, right? And that's persona. And one of the challenges with persona is that don't we're often not conscious of when we are shifting personas, when we're changing our role. It just happens unconsciously. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but we might think this is who we are. I'll give you an example, maybe a couple of examples. I'm gonna I will anonymize everything I talk about. um, I have I have a number of friends who are what you might consider very like an outward appearance you might consider very typical mom type beings, right? What you might think of as family folks. I have a couple of kids and a spouse, and um, uh, you know, present to a lot of the were a very proper image, right? I know people who are work in sort of the public sphere and whatever. And underneath it all, how should I put this? There is like they might belong to a kink community, or they might be swingers, or they might be right. So there's some what that stuff's almost become normal these days, but it hasn't always been that way, right? And so there is this you would be very surprised about the bedroom behavior, or even by some people you meet in the boardroom. The boardroom and the bedroom are very different places, and you might see people who act very proper, almost uptight, and when they're in different situations, behave in a very different way. And I know lots of people for whom this is true. People tend to open up to me. Um, and let me know what's going on with them. Um, and there's some surprise, I've run into some very surprising situations with people that I've known for ages, and like, oh, okay, I didn't realize this was a thing for you, and it's great. I support that. I support all your personas, right? So they have very different personas. People aren't often because of culture, because of norms, because of rules, aren't always just free to let everything hang loose, right? Even on social media, I can't say certain things, right? If I'm on TikTok, I can't talk about drinking. I can't talk about having a cocktail because TikTok will shut me down. Like, it's really crazy, the restrictions. Um, would I prefer to be really honest about everything about me? Sure, absolutely. Um, oh, that happened to you at work where people opened up to you? Yeah, I mean, I keep people's anonymity, and I keep secrets, and hope and think I make people feel comfortable to open up to me, and I don't judge. So that's a big part of it. So okay, so that's ego and that's persona. What do we do? about ego. What is the problem with ego? What's the problem with persona? Um, so one of the issues with persona is I present myself a certain way to people in certain circumstances, and they think that's who I am, right? And spiritually, that's not who I am. That's just an outward expression of a very complex being that includes a divine spirit, as we all have. And so they will act in accordance to the way that I have acted. They'll essentially reinforce my persona. Oh, you're the funny guy at work. Now we're going to expect you to be funny all the time. Or you're the guy who always puts out the chairs at church. And we're going to expect you to always come and put out the chairs. And so people's expectations about us. And there's the implication that if you act outside these norms, you're going to be shunned, at least in a minor way. So there's pressure. It might not be spoken, but we understand what happens when we step outside the norms of a culture, right? It can be an existential threat. People, people attack people who act outside of the cultural norms, even if their actions don't harm anyone, right? We don't like weird. We don't like strange. We don't like others. Other makes us feel unsafe. Sounds like I remember some things. Just remember other things. Um, so the problem with persona and ego is that it can pull us away from experiencing our unfiltered spiritual self, the divine that is within us, the divine that works in flow with the universe, that's connected to all things, that is infinite, unborn, and undying, that part of ourselves. Um, this body, mind, the ego, the persona is very temporal, very limited, right? It takes us away from experiencing our unlimited self because we don't identify with that. So we can work on that. We can work on that. And it starts by just recognizing what we are, right? And say, I'm not the ego. I'm not this body. I have a body. I'm not the body. The body is something you have. You cannot be something that you have. I have a Subaru Outback. I am not a Subaru Outback. I have a cell phone. I am not a cell phone. I have, this body. I have a body. That doesn't make me the body. It feels like I'm in the body, which is an illusion because the sense organs in which I am navigating the world are attached to this body. And they're on the center line of the body, and most of them are above the neck, right? Yes, I've got the skin as a sense organ, and I have proprioceptive stuff. My nervous system can sense my body's position in space and that sort of thing. But my taste, smell, sight, hearing is all geared right here in. And if I, can sort of approximate the center of my head, it can feel like I'm in there. I suggest that. Yeah. Next time someone asks how your day is going, I'm unborn, infinite, and undying. And also, time isn't real. Yeah, I'll never forget. I went to, I went to the Kripalu Center, which is a big spiritual center, former yoga ashram, former monastery, and my teacher, my shamanic teacher, was teaching a class there, and I went to go take a class with her, and stayed at Kripalu for a few days, and um, I ran into her and I hadn't seen her in a little while, and I ran up and I gave her a big hug, and I'm like, Dory, I how long has it been since I've seen you? And she just looks at me, she's like, time isn't real, and like just walked off. As I stood there dumbfounded, I hadn't had that experience yet. I hadn't had the experience of time kind of falling apart and realizing that again, time is a tool. It's useful, right? It's useful for this body to agree to meet other bodies at a certain temporal point, so we all arrive at the same location around the same time. It's useful. But as far as experiencing spiritual truth goes, it's not so useful. It can take us away from our spiritual truth, from our understanding of ourselves as infinite beings. For sure. Yeah, I can. Yeah, absolutely. It's disorienting. So when a lot of people have awakening experiences, um, most people, and I mean the vast majority of people, you have an awakening experience, even a peak awakening experience, where you might, for some period of time, experience complete non duality, complete absorption. This is what people call ego death. Um, all of this goes away. Time goes away, space goes away, the body goes away, the mind goes away. And you're just consciousness. You're just pure consciousness. This is the ineffable. It's impossible to describe. You have to experience it. Um, because any words I could use are not going to really describe it. So for the vast majority of people, that experience is fleeting. It's temporary. You don't go into that in a permanent way. Um, why? Because you're still someone attached to the body. You still want to come back. You're a multi-resurrected, interdimensional, photonic. I don't know what a Heyoka tiger is. Heyoka tiger shaman from pre-mortal space-time with craving for Atlantis. All right. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Um, that's a lot of stuff. That's pretty cool. Um, so for most people, when you have a spiritual awakening experience, the ego drops away. You experience non-duality. And non-duality just means not two. It means you experience yourself. You experience. I don't want to say yourself. Again, words are really hard to wrap around what that experience is like. You experience the flow. You are the flow of the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself. That's what you are. You are the universe experiencing itself. You are the divine experiencing itself. You incarnated in order to do that, in order to have different experiences. And people will often ask me, what's my purpose? I would need to find my purpose. You're doing it. You're doing your purpose. People want like highfalutin stuff. That's ego. My purpose is to, I don't know, be really important someday. You are really important. What you're doing is critical. You're doing the work of the divine just by existing and by incarnating into this body. You are doing the work. You are living your purpose. You might feel like you've strayed from your path sometimes, and that's okay. And you might feel an urge. Not everybody feels the urge to return to source, because that's not where they've gotten to yet. It's not on their path. If you feel the urge to return to source and experience, while you are incarnated, to experience your divinity, then that's something you can do. It's something that's important to you, to have that experience, to have the experience of being both a divine being and incarnating into this physical world and having experiences that way, right? A lot of people these days talk about this, ascension and 5D and like all this stuff. And don't worry about it. Just drop all of that. Drop all of that egoic stuff. Just do your work. Just go turn inside. When you meditate like if this is something you want to experience, meditate inwardly. Try to find when you say the word just I, not I am, not I am this, just I. That expression, that feeling of I comes out of your beingness. In meditation, you can try to trace that back. This is one method. Try to trace the I thought back to its origin. You're not going to find a little dude in there somewhere in your brain thinking thoughts for you. You're going to peel back stuff. So meditate inwardly, pray inwardly, focus inward, right? There's all this like highfalutin, I'm going to channel the Pleiadians. I'm going to talk to these gods and these gods. All that's great. It's fine. But all of those trappings can also take you away from the truth of who you are. We can get caught up in that stuff. Yeah. So words are powerful tools, they're powerful symbols, but they are purposefully limited, right? Like if I say the word dog, it's a pretty broad word, right? There are all different kinds of dogs out there. But if I say the word dog, that eliminates from most people's minds anything that isn't a dog. So it's very limited, right? When I say ego or when I say the word soul or spirit, people have different ideas about what they are, and it's probably pretty limited ideas about what those things are. And any descriptions of those things are not going to really capture the experience of it. Poetry is probably as close as we can get to capturing an experience. So my preferred art form is painting. So I paint and I paint things that I see when I have visionary experiences. And the painting, I like what I paint. And some people like what I paint and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool. It's, whatever, that's really visionary." And I'm like, "Yeah, but this doesn't really capture it." Right? I can't with a painting fully capture a visionary experience that I had. I can represent a moment in time during a visionary experience on in 2D. Maybe if I got really good with like 3D immersive tools and I had sort of like a wraparound screen that I could project. If I had, $10 million to spare, I could build something where I could give people a hint of what a visionary experience is like. But even that is going to be an approximation, right? So we have to chunk things down. We have to limit things in order to represent them sometimes, right? Painting's amazing. Painting for me is a meditative experience. This is one of mine back here. This one was in a show a couple years ago. It was in a show in a gallery. Obviously, nobody bought it, so it's hanging on my wall. But I didn't know that I actually wanted to sell it anyway. I like having him looking over my shoulder. Um, Painting is a wonderful experience. I love the more I do it, the more I love it, the more I learn. In the beginning, it can be a little frustrating because you're not till you get the skills to represent things the way you want to represent them. But it's worth it. and you can go into it with enjoyment. I remember I was doing an online painting class with a woman I was dating, and I learned a lot from this class, but she was getting really frustrated with the teacher. Because the teacher would sometimes like jump around or, not explain something well, or have like we do a palette setup and then all of a sudden she's painting with a color that we didn't have on our palette, or, stuff like that. And they were like little frustrations. And um, this woman I was dating would get really frustrated with her. It became like a joke between us, and but I learned so much, and I had such a great experience, and I produced some really good paintings out of it, and I thought it set me up for other things that I'm doing now, and got me to just got me into painting on a fairly regular basis. So I'm experimenting with some new stuff now, and working. I've been working on my drawing a little bit, on my illustration a little bit, so that I can um, improve my rendering. So when I started, like, this is it's hard to see this painting from this angle. There's light shining off of it, but there that's a very impressionistic painting. And so I wanted to pull a little more realism into the work that I'm doing. So I'm working on that now. Um, but it's great. And it's one of those things like shamanism that you can learn for the rest of your life and never get to the end of it, never learn everything there is to know about it. So back to ego and persona and love. I mentioned love. What is love? From a spiritual love, again, is one of those words, very limiting, right? Um, Somewhat limiting. And in English, love is a weird word because we say things. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. That's really great if you can do that. Yeah. I found, like when I was keeping a dream journal, like just writing things down, I would have to sketch as well. So it's a great activity. Um, let's talk about love. And what does it have to do with ego and persona? So in English, we say things like, I love my kids, I love cheeseburgers, I love my country. Those are not the same things. We just throw that word around willy nilly, and we don't necessarily understand what it means. Very often, when I say the word love, are you in love? Are you blah, 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 right? We think of romantic love, which is another kind of love. The Greeks had different words to describe these different kinds of love, right? There was eros, which was erotic love. There was agape, which was sort of familial love and love of fellow man. Um, the Persians had like, I want to say like 35 different words for love. Sanskrit has 85 different words for love. In English, we just have love. So, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, your friend can help you get started. Yeah, that's great. Well, if you can stretch canvas, I can't. I never learned how to stretch canvases, so I probably should. I'd save a lot of money in in canvases. Um, and surface. Sometimes I paint on panel, though. Sometimes I paint on wood, MDF board. I try all kinds of different surfaces, mostly on canvas, though. But yeah, I should learn how to stretch my own canvas. So love. So we have all these different words for love in these different languages. We have one word in English. Very often, we just mean I feel a great deal of affection for, or I feel sexually attracted to this person, right? Or I feel, whatever. The closest thing most of us get to love, the real spiritual meaning of the word love, is with our children, which can be, not always, can be unconditional love. I just feel love and acceptance. And how many people don't, have issues with accepting their children just as they are, right? See it all the time. So, love, real spiritual love, is unconditional acceptance. That's really what it is. I think of the entire universe. It's a big topic. What does the universe do? The universe contains, without prejudice, everything that exists. You exist, I exist, bugs exist, planets exist, stars exist. It just holds, the universe is the medium in which all of these things exist. Consciousness exists, and everything that arises in our consciousness exists. Without rejection, the universe rejects nothing. That's love. That is universal love. And you may say, well, the universe is cruel to me because I've gone through tough experiences or I've had suffering. Join the club. Everybody has. Everybody has. But still, you exist, or you existed for a time. Your consciousness exists. This body for now exists. Pizza exists, my favorite food. Right? Things we love, things we don't love exist. It is us who rejects things. It's us who has attachments. Oh, I want this to stay, or aversions. I want this. This is bad. These are judgments, right? So love doesn't judge, right? There's the passage from Corinthians that people read at a lot of weddings, right? Love is this, love is that. Love is not jealous, love is kind, right? So people will say, I love you, and then feel jealous of somebody at the same time. That's not love. That's not universal love. It's not universal unconditional love. So the way to experience universal unconditional love is to become unconditionally loving. The surest way to experience more love in your life is to become more loving. And you all deserve more love, not less. I don't care who you are. You all deserve more love, not less. So how do we become more loving? Well, we start to experience things without rejecting them, right? You have something come into you see somebody, you don't like how they're dressed, you catch yourself doing that. Or you think of somebody that you've had difficulty with before, and you do work to forgive them. That doesn't mean you let people harm you. It doesn't mean you forget that somebody might not be able to be trusted. It means you drop the feelings you have. You drop the hard feelings. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And what is the Buddha? The Buddha teaches us that suffering is due to attachment, right? I'm attached to this body. As it gets sick, as it gets old, as it dies, and I'm trying to cling to this body, if I can't just let it go or accept whatever is happening to it, I suffer. I'm fighting with that. I'm fighting with this experience. A relationship ends and I'm attached to the other person. I suffer. I feel grief. I feel heartache. I'm not saying don't feel grief. I'm saying this is where suffering comes from. It comes from this attachment. So we can work on feeling less attachment, and in particular, feeling less attachment to our ego. Feeling less, this is who we actually are. The ego is a tool. It's something we have. It's useful sometimes and not so useful other times. Right? What if, let's say, what if I want to learn something new and my ego tells me, you can't do that, you're not good at that? Right? How is my ego serving me in that moment? I talk to a lot of people. So um, I have almost never thought about anything I can do that I wanted to do. I can't do that. So I've had a lot of experiences in my life. I've had all kinds of experiences in my life. I've been a fashion photographer. I worked as an editor for a fashion magazine. Not something a lot of people know about me. I got my first computer job out of college, never having taken a computer science class or studied computer science in college. I had a 25-year career based on that. You know, when I was born, the doctors told my parents I would never walk. And I wound up playing football and baseball and racquetball and getting a black belt in martial arts. And I walk. Absolutely. Yeah. No, no. You feel free to interject. I like the chat here. Right. So our ego limits us pretty significantly, limits us. Right. I am this. I have to live in this little box that culture tells me I have to live in. I was blessed by developing very early in my life a distrust of people telling me what I could and couldn't do. And that included myself. I'm like, you can't do this. What do you mean I can't do this? I just don't know how yet. Right. So I talk to people about art or painting, and people are like, oh, I don't have an artistic bone in my body. I could never learn how to paint or draw. I can't draw a straight line. I can't draw stick figures, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, do you think that I was born being able to draw and paint? No, I had to learn. I had to practice. And I'm still practicing, and I'm not as good at it as I would like to be. But what happens is people make assumptions about what they can and can't do, either trying something once or never trying it, and ego really holds them back. I talk to people about, and with the art thing, people are like, I can't draw a straight line, and I'm like, I can, I can teach you how to draw a straight line. That's a muscle skill, right? Draw with your shoulder, not with your elbow and wrist, right? And then you can make this and draw rather quickly. I can teach you to draw a straight line in 5 seconds. Nobody ever taught you that. And there aren't a whole lot of straight lines in art anyway, unless you're doing like illustration and you're drawing like architecture and stuff like that, which, whatever. And they make rulers. So if you need one, use a ruler. No problems there whatsoever. So, um, talking to people about meditation, which I often talk about, people will say, I can't meditate because I can't stop my thoughts. And my answer to that is, well, I'm sorry that you tried to meditate once and you're not the fully enlightened Buddha yet. But the good news is you're, you know, you can learn to meditate. That's fine. I'm not perfect at something, so I can't do it, is something that holds us back. And that's ego. It's ego trying to keep ego. One of the ways ego does something is it tries to keep us homeostatic. It tries to keep us in the same place all the time, doing the same things, because that feels safe. Anyway, I've got to run for the day. I've been talking for a little over an hour. Great to see you all. My love to you all. Take care, and I will be back again soon. I'm not sure exactly when, maybe Friday, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. But stay tuned. Subscribe if you want to get notified when